What is up? Welcome back to another video. Today's video we're talking about this, and it may only look like just a camera, but I'm actually here to tell you that it is two completely different cameras, and we'll get into why that is. But before we do, this is the Zenit 412. As you may know, Zenit is a very popular Soviet, then Russian camera manufacturer. A lot of cameras have been produced under the Zenit name, very few of which are kind of quality systems, but they are functional cameras at the very least. It's the old saying, they work. Rudimentary at best. This is no exception. Now, the reason it's actually two different cameras is not because I'm playing a trick on you. There's no half of this that breaks off into another camera and then you combine it together to make one big, awesome, great camera. This is physically one camera, but metaphysically it's two. The reason this is because how it looks. And this is the same with pretty much any product you buy in this kind of consumer-based system that we find ourselves living in today. You have these ideas of how your life will change if you buy this product, whatever that product is. And you have these visions of how it can change you, make you a better person, make you a different person. And that is something that can be utilized to great effect with brands such as Leica or Hasselblad that pitch you this idea of German quality engineering, but they also back it up with very pristine, functional camera systems that are known ubiquitously as professional camera platforms. To a lesser degree, that's something that you see in systems like an AE1 or a K1000, where you are pitched with the idea that this is a beginner camera. These labels exist, and thus you are looking for a certain element from that camera, from buying it. This will help me be a beginner. This will help me be a professional. Some people can fall down the rabbit hole of that and end up purchasing cameras that are well out of their price range by virtue of thinking it will give them those accolades, give them those skills, when in reality, those can only be obtained by the actual practice of taking photos. Having good tools can help, but in reality, it's more about the craftsman rather than the tools. And so that brings us to the Zenit 412 here. The reason that I found this and purchased it in the first place was because I saw it on the internet. Dangerous place to go if you have an affliction such as mine. I have been haunted for the last number of years by this image of the EOS T90, one of Canon's last FD mount cameras, and the design that was pitched was this really unique, almost alien ergonomic design. And there was something about that I found so captivating. And so when I saw the Zenit 412, I thought, oh, well, this is that same design, but, in a more affordable and actual real platform and not some really low-res image that I found on the internet. The thing is that you can buy the body, but if you wanted to buy the equally deceptive ergonomic lens here, it costs a little bit more money. Now, it didn't cost a whole lot. I think it was only like $150 or something like that. It had to ship from Ukraine, so it cost a bit more in shipping, but that's neither here nor there. The camera arrived, and I was immediately regretful of my decisions. You see, while the visual aesthetics on it, the internet, and the part of my brain that wanted it to be something that it wasn't, was quickly reminded by the lapse in quality that Soviet cameras and Russian cameras, an extension of that, bring to the table. And this is where I am very bummed, because the first iteration of this review that I was going to write, before I even received the camera, I started working on it. I started drafting up some notes. Genuinely, I'm kind of proud of some of them. Yeah, so I was going to call it like proof that the Soviets ended up at the moon. This is before I found out it was released in 2000, because I did very little research before buying it, because I'm very smart. Aesthetic hopes and promises of Soviet style. And then I was going to tie this into, and I'm actually very proud of this, so I'm going to just repeat it anyway. Just a few years after David Hasselhoff's performance at the Berlin Wall, and 7 years before his performance on the floor of a hotel room, when he's drunk and eating the burger, this was released, right? Like, that's iconic, David Hasselhoff. Then I was going to say something to the effect of, jarring to see the Zenit name on something that isn't stainless steel. The cosmonaut's answer to the Hasselblad, because it looks like a spaceship camera. And I was pretty proud of a lot of those lines. But in reality, the words that I kind of came up with upon holding the camera and using it: chic plastics, ergonomic, rehoused mediocrity, and style over substance. The last thing I want to do as a person on the internet is make foolish mistakes that I then have to come clean about and air out. But I do think it's important to have this conversation because on one hand, there is a perception of a world, right? There's a perception of a reality, a life, that if you feel you want to obtain, people will lay out steps. Like, oh, if you want to take good photos, you have to get a Hasselblad, you have to get a Leica M6, you have to get a Minolta X700, you have to get a Canon A1, F1, you've got to get a whatever. And I've done that too. I've made plenty of recommendations on a number of different things, but it's all been, I think, under the guise of tangible results and not just like vibes and feelings. And this was a purchase that was based purely off of vibes and feelings. And I feel like it's good on one hand because this was a very low stakes situation and it's a very kind of silly thing. And functionally, it is a working camera. In fact, I do have images from it, so I'll put those here. The only gripes I have really is just that it is literally rehoused mediocrity. I took the top off of this, and there's nothing but hollow voids and vacuums in there. A very limited shutter speed range. The lens that's on here, it's actually kind of like a infamous lens that's been rehoused into like this toy-like build, and the aperture adjustment is stiff and it's hard to actually move anything. Other things, such as the metering system, is terrible. It's a partial depression in order to, connect the contact, but it's so hard to get to that partial pressure that you end up just usually taking the picture anyway, realizing that it's way out of exposure. The range of motion of the advance lever is an atrocity. The sounds that this thing produces, it's like a rickety station wagon that is, hanging on for dear life. The overall plastics here are very cheap and loud. While it may look pretty to certain audiences, myself included, the reality is it is nothing but a dolled up Zenit camera, where I think at this stage it was probably cheaper to get plastic than stainless steel, so they just transitioned over to that. There is an element of that kind of cool alien ergonomic, and I will say it is like nice to hold on to, but it is less than any weight whatsoever. As I mentioned many times in the past, the beautiful thing about this and any other camera system out there is this is still functional. As I mentioned, I did take pictures with it, and while the pictures may not have been the best things in the whole wide world, it's still a usable camera. This isn't some digital camera mocked up to look cool with some crappy third-party sensor from 20 years ago. This is a functionally decent camera, although it has many shortcomings in both its build quality and overall usability. It still delivers on the promise of being a camera. The shutter speed range is limited. The DX contact, I don't really trust all that well. The metering system, not my favorite thing in the world. The rewind system, also not my favorite thing in the world. Despite my misgivings with the system, despite the cheap build quality, despite the lack of really any kind of notable features except for an incredibly strange self-timer dial thing, this still works. As I mentioned, I did take pictures with it, and while the pictures are not amazing, they do still provide tangible evidence to the fact that it doesn't always matter what camera you have. If you can't afford the Leicas or the Hasselblads of the world, if you can't achieve that status symbol of being a professional photographer with a professional camera, that's okay. You don't have to. A much better use of your money would be getting something that you can afford and then spending the difference on film to perfect and to hone in on the craft of taking quality photos. A lesson I also have not learned very well, but still. Something like this is appealing because it's unique. It's an individual piece. It's funny, funky, strange. It's reminiscent of many things, such as the T90 aesthetic mock-up. It looks like an alien spaceship. It looks like it should be on the moon, not here in this park on Earth. And for all those reasons, it's really quite wonderful. But holding it and shooting it and using it leaves a lot to be desired. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's you, at the end of the day, that ultimately matters the most. The photographer, who's behind the lens. Many talented photographers I know, I could give them this camera and they can take amazing photos with it. They might not be very happy based on the things that I stated with the build quality and the difficulties in using it, but they can still use it. It will still work for them. Likewise, I can take a Leica M7 and give it to a beginner photographer, and they might take a good photo here or there, but they also probably won't. And that's okay as well. I could give them this camera and they could take probably the exact same photos, although probably, again, major difference in quality in terms of user experience, which I do think kind of yields some different results. But this does exist as two separate cameras. The camera I wanted it to be, the camera that I crafted this, in my opinion, beautiful review for, or the camera it ended up being, which is cheap Russian plastics, kind of exists somewhere in the middle. The shelf camera aesthetic, if you will, as a piece of memorabilia, history of this time period, but don't use it. That's pretty much it for the Zenit 412. If you'd be interested in buying it, I'm going to probably try to sell it here kind of soon because I don't really need it. And yeah, I'm just going to pretty much put it up for sale for the exact amount of money that I bought it for, so that way it's like a net zero gain or loss. So that's the only reason it's going to be priced the way it is, because I cannot rationalize losing money on this, if that is understandable. Anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate it very much. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you on the next one.